Let's start with our first concept today. The first one we want to talk about is the biblical model for multi-generational ministry. Now, what I want to do is start with a biblical foundation for what we're going to teach. So I've chosen Psalm 127 as a foundation. Now, there's a few verses in this psalm, 5 to be exact. So let me just read it quickly for you to create our foundation for this course. Psalm 127 says this: "Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain." Now, I want you to notice these two things before we change to the next verse. He's concerned about two things: the city and his house. So keep that in mind. Now he begins in verse 2 by saying, "It is vain for you to rise up early and to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he gives his beloved sleep." Now he's identifying something else about his worry. He is so worried he can't sleep. So he's staying up at night, worrying about the house and worrying about the city. So the Lord answers him back in this psalm in verse 3. So the Lord says, "Behold, children are the heritage of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward, like arrows." And I want you to pay attention to that, because the Lord is giving an instructional metaphor here. "Like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has a quiver full of them." So what the Lord is saying is that if you pay attention to the arrows and you have a quiver full of them, you will not have to worry. So this is how God is answering his concern about the future. And then he ends up by saying this: "Happy is the man who has a quiver full of them. He will not be ashamed, but he will speak with his enemies at the gate."
Hey, Lori here. You're watching content provided by DOE1. Whether you are at the beginning of your ministry or seasoned, DOE1 is the premier location for all things ministry. Check us out at doe1.org. Now let's get back to your video.
Are you worried about your future? Have you ever built something and you wonder if it will last? There's several questions that each of us need to ask ourselves about our future, because the answer to your worry about your future may be found in multi-generational ministry. Now look at this. Here's the first question: will those who follow me treasure what I treasure? Have you ever valued something, spent so much time building it, worked hard, the sweat and blood and tears that went into it, sacrifices that went into it, only to be concerned will the next generation take care of it? Here's another question: will the next generation appreciate the price that I paid to deliver this to them? How about this question: what will happen to everything I've built when I'm gone, or when I retire, or when I change ministry seasons? What will happen to everything I built? These are the kind of questions that Psalm 127 addresses. Now remember, he says the answer to these questions are found in the arrow. So if the arrow represents the younger generation, the bow then represents the older generation. So let me give you a quick illustration from the bow and the arrow. Now first of all, let's look at the older generation. It's the bow. Now the bow is tried and true. Look at all the precisions on this bow that I brought today. This bow has lots of mechanics and precision to it. This bow can tell you so many stories because it's been in lots of battles. It's been in many battlefields, hunting trips, all kinds of things. This bow is tried and true. The design of this bow is really not for the bow, it's for the arrow. See, here's the thing about the future. The bow cannot go. The bow always has to stay behind. It can only send the arrow into the future. So this bow is strong, it's durable, it's tested, it has refined mechanics, but all alone, it's really useless. This bow by itself is not a weapon at all. It's just an instrument that needs something else to fulfill it. Now let's look at the arrow. Now this arrow is sharp, it's made for speed, it is sleek, it is cutting edge. Here's the thing about arrows. Arrows have to be shaped. Arrows have to be sharpened. Arrows have to be shouldered. That's the quiver. And arrows have to be shot. An arrow without a bow is also useless. There's very little you can do with an arrow all by itself. There's very little you can do with a bow all by itself. But bows and arrows together, you can stand with your enemy at the gate. You can keep the enemy from coming to your house, from coming to your city. You can protect your future, but only with bows and arrows. See, this is the concept of multi-generational ministry. An arrow by itself is wandering aimlessly through the world trying to hit the mark. A bow by itself is just talking about the good old days, all the battles that were won, but it's just collecting dust on the shelf. It's only when a bow and an arrow is together that they can change the future. I want you to consider this before we end this lesson. You need bows in your life if you're an arrow. You need arrows in your life if you're a bow. Bows who just hang around bows, they kind of get a little outdated, talk about what used to be. Arrows that just hang out with arrows, always talking about the future, but can't seem to ever reach it. Maybe the answer to your future is in the bow and the arrow. Multi-generational ministry is the secret to great success in the ministry.
Hey, Lori here. If you like what you were watching, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click on the bell to receive notifications when new content goes live. You can find content like this on DOE1, the premier location for all things ministry. See you on the next video.